Now coming to the story of the jinn, what exactly happening is in Islam, we all believe that jinn exist. That's in the Quran, no doubt about that. And what we know, the order from the Quran is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created angels. And angels are his creation who do good, but they never can do any evil. So Quran said that they obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they never disobey him. So they always obedient. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the people like that who always obey him. They never disobey. But among the angels there are who can improve them, so they can be even better than the others. So that they can do. There are angels who are better than the other angels, but they never can do any evil. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, after long time, we don't know the right time, he created the jinn. Jinn basically means people who are hidden. So it is a name, in relation to human being. We can't see them, but they see us. So, from Jannah, Jinn, we have so many rules from that. Jannatun is also garden, hiding things. The jinn are the creation who are hidden from us. We don't see them. Allah created them from the fire. That's in the Quran, so many times. So Allah created them from the fire. And they have got both things. They can do good. They also can do something bad. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a human being better than them. So human being better than them is very clear from the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the human being as a Khalifa and in charge of this earth. So that's also in the Quran. Shaitan, the leader of jinn, he became jealous. So this jealousy is also mentioned in the Quran. He became jealous and he determined that now he's going to misguide. Quran makes very clear he is your clear enemy. Aduwwum mubin. Shaitan is Iblis is our clear enemy. And he and all his followers. Quran says, Innahu yarakum wa qabiluhu. To qabil, all his family, all his supporters, they basically are jealous of us. They are our clear enemy. So he has made very clear that he will do all his best to misguide us, to stop us from being guided, to basically do anything possible that whatever he can do, he will do. Unless what I said, no, you don't have any power, other than whispering. So whispering is the power Allah has given to. Like, whispering basically, this is a power which Allah has given to everybody. Meaning, like human being, like media, they misguide. Newspapers misguide the people. Many writers, they misguide the people. Many speakers misguide the people. Even many Muslims misguide the people. They can make this misguiding by whispering, by teaching. Anybody can do. So Shaitan also has the same thing. What he does, he just run in the vein of the people and he misguides. So for example, if you are walking on the path, a woman comes, Shaitan will whisper, look at her. But if you don't look, you lower your eye, he's not going to open your eye. He's not going to force you. He only whispers, look at. That thing even human being does. Many of your friends will say, oh, look at that thing. Look at this thing. People do the same thing. So what Shaitan has got the power, that power actually shared by human being. That's why Quran actually calls not only jinn as Shaitan, also human being. Shayateen, ins wal jinn. Both are Shaitan. So there are human beings who whisper, teach. There are jinn who whisper and teach. The only difference is, jinn, we don't see them. Human being we can see, but this whispering and teaching goes all the time. People keep doing. This is the power Allah has given. But to stop people from being misguided, what Allah has done, Allah has given us the true nature, fitra. True fitra. If people understand the fitra, it really helps them a lot. Then Allah has given us those abilities, faculties, eye and all those. They help us to understand, to get the proper knowledge. And then on the top of that, He has given us the mind, the reasoning. The reason, that the most noble thing that a human being have been given. There's nothing more noble for a human being than having the intellect, reason, and aql, reasoning. If people use their fitra, their faculties, and their reasoning properly, nobody can misguide. No newspaper can misguide, no media can misguide you, no shaitan can misguide, nobody can misguide. Just think properly. And the way basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made very clear is that whenever, it is in the Quran, whenever somebody teaches you something, just you need to learn two things. Ask the person, whether shaitan a human being, ask the person the proof. If shaitan tells us, do this thing, ask the proof. What the proof is good for me? First thing, you have to ask the proof. Second thing is, what is the consequences? Any action, any statement, whenever you learn from someone, you need to know these two things. First thing is, what is the proof? Second thing, what is the consequence? Sometimes there could be proof, but the consequences will tell you, no, don't do this thing. Not necessarily everything which is loud, sound, right, you should do, because the consequences, are not right. For example, now you can see in the north, all the people are fighting about moon sighting. Everybody think they have got revelation from heaven. Their proof is so strong and this and that. But what they don't understand, they can't see with their eyes. What are the consequences? Consequences of your argument is division among the society, division among the believers. When moon sighting is something where Muslims should have one opinion. To any opinions which divide them, basically there's some problem with that. Imam Hanifa used to have his own opinion, but he did not follow these people. So first, this is two things we need to understand. Whenever people make any statement, any action, anything, any behavior, any teaching, you need to ask. First thing, you have to ask the proof. Second thing is, what is the consequences? And that Quran always keeps saying, look the consequences. Quran always says, what is the proof? Bring the proof. Hatu burhanakum. Bring the proof. What is your argument? The proof, and the second thing, consequences. These two things, if people keep learning them, they become wise. That's what wisdom basically means. That's what reasoning means. Use your reason properly. So when people say anything about jinn, the first thing is to ask the proof. And proof is the Quran and the Sunnah. It is not enough that you cannot explain something. There could be certain phenomenon in this world which I cannot explain. But if I cannot explain something, I have no authority to explain it with the ignorance. It could be possible that somebody has a behavior. He goes to doctors. Doctors say, we don't know what it is. We can't prescribe any medicine. We don't think it. We never know this thing. We never experience something. Then you come to an Imam and he says, no, he has got a jinn. Tell me really what is the proof. Because somebody cannot explain something, how it means it is jinn. It could be an illness which people don't know. There are many phenomena in this world we don't know. We can't explain. If you can't explain something, how can it mean that it is jinn? You need to have proof for that. So what happening in our society actually is, since somebody cannot, people say, this person has got something, doctors don't know, it must be jinn. How can it must be jinn? It could be an illness which people don't know. I don't know. So people say, like, for example, people will say that Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmullah ta'ala, you take out a jinn from the people. He could have taken out something from the people, but what is the proof that what he took out is jinn? There's no proof for that. So this is what we need to understand properly, that in anything when people make a claim, the first question really is, what is the proof? And the second thing I mentioned actually, about that we need to learn the consequences of any teaching, what will happen. Now you see, if what actually jinn can do, Quran can never hide us from us. The only thing that Quran warns about jinn is this: what Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan. O believers, don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. Quran never claims that they're going to possess you, or they're going to hold you, they're going to stop you from something. Never. Quran said don't follow their footsteps. What following means? You cannot be follower unless you've got will, irada. People never can follow someone without irada. When you follow someone, you must have irada, you must have will. If you are possessed by someone, you don't have will. The will is gone. Quran never mentions anywhere that people lose their will. It never happens in the Quran. Quran always makes very clear people have will. Quran says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. People have got will whether believe or not to believe. Whether obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't obey, people have got will. That's why Quran commands, other commands are unnecessary. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obey Allah, His messenger, if you can't obey Him, it unnecessarily command. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands people to establish the prayer, but we can't do because shaitan can possess us, then it unnecessarily command if we cannot do. Every command of Allah basically simply means that we have got will to do it. We have got will and we have got power to do it. And has given us. Shaitan never can force it. Quran said, La tattabi'u, don't follow. Following simply means you have got will. If Allah said don't follow, it means you have got power not to follow Him. That simply means you have got will and you have got power not to follow. If He asks you to do something and Allah said don't do, it means you have power not to do it. If Shaitan says to you don't go for the prayer, it simply means that you have power not to listen to him. Because Allah said don't follow his footsteps. It never can happen that Shaitan commands you something and he takes away the power from you. It never can happen because it goes against the Quran. Quran says, La tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan. Don't follow the footsteps of Shaitan. If shaitan can force us, then this command is basically irrelevant. It does not make any sense to anybody. So that taken meaning is whenever shaitan says something, you have got choice, you have got will, and you got power to disobey shaitan. It never can happen that shaitan can force you. So the Quran, this is the only authentic teaching we have got about shaitan, and that's in the Quran. The Quran, Allah said, لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. Don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. ومن يتبع خطوات الشيطان فإنه يأمر بالفحشاء والمنكر. That was Allah SWT warning us that shaitan always will command the people to do the evils. Munkar, fahsha, things which are shameful. That's what shaitan will command. So this verse make very clear that shaitan never can force us. Shaitan never can take away from us our will. He cannot take away from us our the power. He never can do. And this is also very clear at the end of the story, when the people are gathered in the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانُ لَمَّا قُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعْدَ الْحَقِّ. In the day of judgment, when everybody is there and things are there, people who blame the shaitan, they will say to Allah, shaitan is the one who misled us. All this will happen. Shaitan that time will defend himself. And shaitan will make very clear, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعْدَ الْحَقِّ. Allah made true promise. Allah's promise is true. And then he said, وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ. I promised you, but my promise was not true. It's not true promise. أَخْوَعَدْتُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ وَمَا كَانَ لِيَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. I did not have any power upon you. No power. إِلَّا أَنْ دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. The only power was, I taught you, I called you, and you listened to me. That's exactly what human beings, what people do. When people like Fir'aun, what they did? They just, invite people, they call people, all the unbelievers, like Abu Jahl and his party, what they do? They invite people, they call people to something. In this matter, shaitan and human being both share the same thing. Shaitan has more power because he can whisper, he can run in the winds of the people, that he can do. But what he does actually, not more than that. Then he says, فَلَا تَلُومُونِي. Don't blame me. If shaitan can possess, then we can blame him. We can say to Allah, he possessed us. I wanted to go for the prayer and he came and held me, but it never happens. Tell me, it ever happens to you that you go for the prayer and shaitan stops you? It ever happens really that, there's a haram and halal and you want to get halal and shaitan stops you, force you to go for haram? It never happens. He only teaches you. Only thing he can do, he teaches you, he whispers to you. That's what everybody does. Shaitan never possesses anybody, never holds anybody. This never happens. The first thing is we have learned what exactly truth is about shaitan and jinn in the Quran. These two verses, they are very clear. In the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't have any sound hadith anywhere where it has come that shaitan has possessed anybody, shaitan has forced anybody to do something. This never has come. So for human being on the one hand, they are so respected. They walk on the ground, on the land, they're masters of the land, they are masters of the ocean, masters of the sea. And jinn, they are not masters. They are in the caves, they are in the dirty places. These are the places where they have. And there are hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in many books of the hadith, especially in Sahih Muslim, from Abdullah Masud radhiyallahu anhu, he said that we were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam one night, and then we missed him, and we looked for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the valleys and everywhere, and we said, could be that something happened to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, maybe he has been killed. It was very bad night for us. It is فَبِتْنَا بِشَرِّ لَيْلَةٍ بَاتَ بِهَا قَوْمٌ. Very, very bad night. When it came, the morning came, so we saw the Prophet coming from Hira. And we asked Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we missed you and we looked for you and we didn't find you. And that's why we spent the night in very bad condition. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, one of the caller of Jinn, he came to me and I went with him and I read to them the Quran. In Mas'ud said, then the Prophet ﷺ took us there and he showed us the traces of jinn and their fires and all those things. And they asked him what we can eat. So the Prophet ﷺ said, you can eat any bone on which Allah's name has been mentioned. If it happens in your hand, you can eat that bone. And your animals, they can eat, the dung of the people. The Prophet ﷺ made, very clear for وَكُلُّ بَعْرَةٍ عَلَفٌ لِدَوَابِّكُمْ. And then the Prophet said to people, لا تستنجوا بهما فإنهما طعام إخوانكم من الجن, because they are food of jinn. So this is what jinn are. Now, this creation which is lower than human being, this creation which is so humiliated, no respect in compared to human being, and Allah SWT has cursed the shaitan so clearly. Now the human beings are scared of them. Now anything happens to us, we just associate to jinn. So this really, no doubt, big mistake, and it has become big business for the people all over the world, and that's what we need to understand. Anywhere you go, it is basic. I have been teaching this course in London. I said to the people, why is all the jinn they are in East London, nowhere else? Why is it like that? Just think, because people are ignorant there. Do they believe in these things? People who believe nothing happened to them. I was in Oxford. In Oxford, one of my friend, his son-in-law and his daughter, they left the house. They live in the house. So I asked them what happened, why they left the house. Said because there are so many jinn in the house, so they scared and they left the house. I said, no, don't believe in these things. So he said, no, you come. I said, okay, I'll come. And when I went to the house, then they're so scared. They said to me, you go first, or we'll follow. I went everywhere, in every single room, nothing. I said, nothing is there. Nothing. It is just, made up a story. Nothing. I have seen this story many times. In my village, the woman, a jinn used to come to her. And I was a student at the time. I was not even a teacher. But I did not believe in all these things anytime, anyway. So people said to me, I said, okay, when the jinn comes to our hut, call me. And they called me. I went there. So she was thinking, I'm a young boy. I will be scared. So she's, frightening me. I did not believe in that anyway. So I asked a certain question, which I know that she knows. So jinn is answering all those questions. Then I asked those questions, which jinn can know, but she cannot know. Then she became normal, and she said, oh, jinn has now run away. He will come later on. So I said to the people, whenever next time comes, call me. As long as I was in the village, jinn never came. It never happened. It never came. Because in all this basically people make a trick. This thing I've seen so many times, so many stories in Lucknow, in the villages, everywhere. It never happened. All the tricks by the people. Sometimes people bleed, blood comes. Sometimes people are lifted. Things like so many tricks people in this matter. There's nothing truth in this matter. There's no single hadith which can tell that people can be possessed by jinn. Nothing there. Only thing that we can see in the hadith is that they, can misguide. They can mislead. And that also can it can happen sometime to the prophets. They can actually affect in that sense. But that's what means. Meaning they are misguiding, they're whispering, and sometimes that can lead to certain harm. But they hold someone, impossible. Somebody was sitting in the mosque in Oxford. So I asked what the person is. People say he's got a jinn. I said, don't you understand really? If there is a jinn possessing, why jinn will bring him to the mosque? Is it the place where jinn brings the people? Jinn will take him away from the mosque, not to bring to the mosque. Just think, if he's in the mosque, it simply means there's no jinn. Jinn not there, why jinn will bring him to the mosque? Somebody phoned me one of the Ramadan that somebody has come from India and he cures women from the jinn. So he takes for every session 1,000 pounds. For one session to cure people from the jinn. And he has got 30,000 jinn with him. 30,000 jinn. With big army. I said, with 30,000 jinn, he can conquer the whole world. He does not need to come as a beggar from India to this country to beg the women, get the money. And then he got all this money and went back. 30,000 jinn. Just think really. If you have got 30,000 army of the jinn and nobody can see them, you easily can conquer the whole world. And people believe in these stories. And then he got so much money. So, this thing all the time you can see, these stories going on really, and people keep believing. The simple matter is there are sometimes illnesses, sometimes people have got certain tricks that were happening. We don't have any single proof in the Quran, the Sunnah, something like that. No proof in the real life. It never happened. So it could be possible, no doubt really. Sometimes could be people's condition is so bad, doctors cannot explain. I don't deny that. This can happen certain time that you have some certain illness nobody can explain. But not being able to explain how it means it is jinn. It is just produced by your mind. You make up this story. There's no proof for that. Similarly, there are many hadith in Sunan and also in Bukhari, Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ had advised people what to read. I don't want to go in detail because we don't have much time. So this is truth. What the summary of these hadiths basically is, the Prophet ﷺ is teaching that people can be whispered by shaitan. And when shaitan whispers, it can harm. Like for example, when a human being misguides, for example, if somebody, shaitan, some human being says, okay, use the drug, these drugs are very good. When you, take them, you fly and you become, something different. You are in heaven. That's what people think. So then you don't believe in the first time, second time, third time until he convinces you, and then you taste. Then you taste again more and more, and you start flying. So, and then what happens is, then the harm comes to you. So this harm has come. He did not harm you, but you listen to him, harm has come. So similarly, when people listen to shaitan, harm will come. But not shaitan is making the harm. You basically following him and the harm is coming. So like that's why Ayyub alayhi salam, once he said, oh Allah, shaitan has touched me with the harm. And in other words, he said, Rabbani, I read the both verse from the Quran. Quran said, إِذْ قَالَ وَقَالَ وَأَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ ضُرٌّ, harm has come to me. وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And other verse, Ayyub alayhi salam said, وَذْكُرْ عَبْدَنَا أَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الشَّيْطَانُ بِنُصْبٍ وَعَذَابٍ. Shaitan has caused me this tiredness, and that's how the right manner is really. When any harm happens to you, no doubt, it has come somewhere from shaitan. Shaitan has caused. But shaitan did not create the harm. It basically meaning you listen to shaitan, you followed his advice, then it has resulted. So shaitan never can create any harm for anybody. Never can happen. It's impossible. He never brings the harm. But what happens is, when people listen to shaitan's advice, that advice, if you follow that, that will result into some harm. So that can happen. So sometimes the Quran, relates the harm to shaitan because this reason, because all the causes. You listen to shaitan and you follow the shaitan, and that resulted into this harm. So that, the Quran said very clearly, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. If you don't know something, then basically you have no right to make a claim. First you have to know. The Quran says, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. If you don't know, so all those people who claim that somebody has got a jinn possession or something like that, ask them, what is your proof? How do you know this thing? What is the proof? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden people, from saying anything for which they have no knowledge. And this is certainly we don't have knowledge because we can't see jinn. What you see is, there's no way you can see them. What you see is something different. But you claim that this is something jinn. You see certain, activity or some disturbance, and they interpret that this could be jinn, but there's no proof for that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created so many illness, so many things in this world. Something we know, something we don't know. But if you don't know, that does not mean really that we have to claim something, spiritual or related to jinn. First thing is, this thing has been discussed in detail by Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri in his book Al-Milal wal-Nihal, in other places. So he said, let's see what is true about the jinn and what is not true. We can accept the shaitan whispers. We can accept the shaitan can run in the veins of the people. We also accept that when shaitan whispers, it can have effect on your face, on your mood, and your behavior. All this we accept. But to claim that shaitan can possess the people, can control over them, and they have no will, no irada, no power, فَقَدْ قَالَ مَا لَا عِلْمَ لَهُ بِهِ. Anybody who claims like that, they have said something for which they have no knowledge. They know. وَهَذَا حَرَامٌ لَا يَحِلُّ. This unlawful haram is not allowed. Anybody who claims, they're making a claim for which they have no proof, and certainly, saying something like that is haram. And Allah has said, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. If you don't know, don't claim, don't make anything. Just be quiet, say, I don't know. Simple thing, just make it very clear, I don't know. وَهَذِهِ الْأُمُورِ لَا يُمْكِنُ أَن تُعْرَفَ الْبَتَّةَ إِلَّا بِخَبَرٍ صَحِيحٍ. This thing that shaitan can possess, jinn can possess somebody, this only can be known through a sound report. If you come from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَلَا خَبَرَ عَنْهُ sallallahu alayhi wa sallam بِغَيْرِ مَا ذَكَرْنَا. And the Prophet ﷺ never told anything like that. He only has told about whispering of shaitan. He never told that shaitan can possess. This never has come. You know, this thing, if it is true really, it is so harmful. It should be in the Quran. If Quran can mention the whispering of shaitan, and Quran makes very clear shaitan is your enemy, if he's enemy and he can possess us, that is the first thing to mention, rather than mention the whispering. Quran says, you know, seek protection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the whispering of shaitan. If shaitan can possess, the first thing should be seek protection from Allah, you know, against the possession of the shaitan. But that's Quran never teaches. When Quran teaches us about our enemy, clear enemy, Quran says adu mubin, clear enemy, this teaching never can come. So he said there are no khabar from the Prophet ﷺ in this matter. Wabillahi tawfiq. And then he said that wasah anna shaitana, it is also true that shaitan can cause, you know, certain disturbance in the behavior, you know, when the people do something that happen. This is in the Quran. You know, I mentioned all those anyway. وهذا نص القرآن وما توجب المشاهدة وما زاد على هذا فخرافات من توليد العزامين والكذابين. Other than this, means when the people claim the possession, this is something produced and generated by these Raaqis, those who do ruqya. So these people have, you know, invented the stories. Nothing like that. All the ruqya people, they are the one who have done. There's nothing that, you know, it is just their lies. They keep making lies, and the way they do, you know, it is basically not only money. It is money and sometimes, you know, sex things. Both things are there, and you know, on wider scale, you know, it is basically money, and the money they generate through these things. And you know, if people cannot believe how much money they get in this, you know, for any session. Imam Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala, so this is Imam al-Zahiri, Imam Tahawi is a Hanafi, he writes in his Sharh Ma'il Athar, he said, وَالنَّاسُ إِنَّمَا أُمِرُوا بِالْإِسْتِعَادَةِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ فِيمَا جُعِلَ لَهُ سُلْطَانٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَهِيَ الْوَسْوَسَةِ. People have been only commanded to ask Allah to protect them from the waswasa of shaitan. You can see all the time the Prophet ﷺ asked people to make ta'awud is from waswasa. Nothing else, no possession. If shaitan can possess, then ta'awud should be from that. But all the hadith of ta'awud, even the Quran, when Quran says fasta'id billahi minash shaitan rajim, and when Quran says qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas, all the ta'awud that has come in the Quran Sunnah, it always about whispering. Quran never makes people to ask, commands people to ask Allah to protect them, to save them from the possession of the shaitan. Because that's never happened. So Imam Tahawi said, only thing Allah has said that what shaitan has got the power. And shaitan has got the power for waswasa. إِنَّمَا أُمِرُوا بِالْإِسْتِعَاذَةِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ فِيمَا جُعِلَ لَهُ سُلْطَانٌ عَلَيْهِمْ. This is the only thing that shaitan has got power over them. وَهِيَ الْوَسْوَسَةُ لِتَجْنِيبِ الشَّرِّ. And then he goes on. But he said then after that, if people claim that shaitan can cause harm to their property or can cause harm to the animals or something on their body, this has no proof, and there has no verse and hadith has come to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save the, protect them from shaitan regarding these things. This never has come. Similarly, if you look Imam Zamakhshari rahimahullah ta'ala in his Kashaf, and also he's Mu'tazili, and Mu'tazili basically don't believe in this thing anyway. So he also makes, you can see there you have got Ibn al-Zahiri, you have got Imam Tahawi, the Hanafi, you have got this Mu'tazili, and then you see Imam Razi in his Tafsir Mafatihul Ghaib. He said, "Ash-shaytanu la qudrata lahu al-battata ala iqa'i an-nas fi al-amrat wal-alam." Shaitan has no power absolutely at all to cause cause people to fall in the illness or pain. He has no power. So, and similarly, for Imam Shafi rahmatullah, as somebody mentioned, Imam Shafi rahmatullah himself has said, if somebody believes in this thing, I will reject his witness. If somebody believes that he has seen jinn and he possessed the jinn or something like that, I will reject it. This has come in Bayhaqi. Rabi says, سمعت الشافعي يقول من زعم أنه يرى الجن أبطلنا شهادته إلا أن يكون نبيا. If anybody who claims that he has seen the jinn, we will invalidate his witness, except if he is prophet. Only prophet can see, nobody else can see. That's again is coming from Ibn al-Zahiri in his Al-Milal, volume number 5 and page number 12. He says, وَإِذَا أَخْبَرَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى أَنَّنَا لَا نَرَاهُمْ فَمَنِ ادَّعَى أَنَّهُ يَرَاهُمْ أو رآهم فهو كاذبهم. Anybody, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, Jinn, you can't see Jinn. Now if anybody claims that they can see Jinn, they're liars. Allah said, you can't see them. They see you, but you can't see them. If anybody claims that they can see them, they're liars. إلا أن يكون من الأنبياء عليهم السلام, except a prophet. Prophets can do. فذلك معجزة لهم كما نص رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه تفلت عنه الشيطان ليقطع عليه صلاته. This happened to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فأخذته فذكرت دعوة أخي سليمان ولولا ذلك لأصبح موثقا يراه أهل المدينة. Similarly, about Sulaiman alayhi salam, he got the position of Jinn, and one of the Ifrit, big Jinn, he said to him this. But that's right. Jinn have among Jinn there are people who are more powerful than the other. They can do many things, but nobody can get control over them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only made that thing for Sulaiman alayhi salam. And some prophets, they can see them, they have seen them, met them, and they became Muslim on their head, like Musa alayhi salam, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is true. But anyone other than the prophets, we never have any proof of this thing, that they have seen the Jinn or they mix with them. There's no proof at all. And I've seen really, it's one of the Deobandi alim used to live next to our big madrasa. He used to say to me that actually believing in all those things, this basically against Iman. This thing that Shaitan can do, Jinn can do all those things against Iman. This believers cannot believe in something like that. So this is what you can see has come from the people, in Islam, earlier generation, not actually something we invented in our time. In our even time, like Muhammad Zahir is from the 5th century. Imam Tahawi was earlier than him, and Imam Razi, and all these people. There are people who have been saying this thing. There have been few cases, and among the people who believe in this matter, that Shaitan can possess, a Jinn can possess, the big name is Ibn Taymiyyah. So that's the only big name we can find really, where he used to think that Jinn possess and they have control over the people and they can take away the will from them, and he used to treat people like that. And there are many stories. He himself has mentioned his fatawas, and also his student Ibn Qayyim has mentioned about him that he has seen Ibn Taymiyyah doing this thing. And Ibn Taymiyyah also had made a claim that a Shaykh died, and his students came to Ibn Taymiyyah and they said, our Shaykh after the death has been writing letters to us, and they showed the letter to Ibn Taymiyyah. Said, no, I said to them, no, this is not letter from your Shaykh, this is a letter of Jinn, and I know their writings. So Ibn Taymiyyah claimed that no, he has seen the writings of Jinn, he knows how they write, things like that. Certainly, I respect Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, and I really learned from him a lot of the things. But one thing he has taught us, that don't accept anything unless there is a proof from the Quran Sunnah. Now this we also test Ibn Taymiyyah also with the same criteria. Ibn Taymiyyah has claimed all those things, but without any proof. So there's no proof from Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Qayyim said, I've seen my teacher taking out the Jinn from the people. Yeah, you could have seen that he has taken out something, but how do you know it is Jinn? It could be anything, like when people have illness, something could be, coming like something, like, when people breathe, you can see some breath is coming to you, something flying from the mouth, but how do you know it is Jinn? What makes you to think it is Jinn? How do you know how Jinn look like? How Jinn are around us? Do we know? Can we look them? If something coming out from the mouth, how do you know with certainty it is Jinn? So we don't say Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn Qayyim are lying. We say, yes, certainly there must be something coming out from the mouth, but there's no single proof on the face of the earth that what came out, that was Jinn. There's no proof for that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made many illnesses for the people, and and that exist. For example, what you can see sometimes what happens is somebody will be lying on a bed, and this Raaqi, who's actually liar anyway. Quran says don't believe in these people. Quran about these people anyway. The Raaqi will come and he makes some dua, read some Quran, and you can see the person is flying, rising above the bed. It's all trick, and actually among them those who want to tell the truth, they themselves admit it's all trick. We play the trick so people can believe. Just think really, how when you cure somebody, he will rise above the bed. Why cure needs something like that? If you cure someone, what should happen is he should be cured from the illness. Why for cure you need somebody to rise above the bed? Why this should happen? Why there need for that? Why they need to show some magic? So this they're making up. So when you see something like that, you think, oh, there must be something, because he says. Sometimes what happens is they tie the person, they beat the person. This really is a very, very bad, no doubt. Anybody who's hit, it really is sin, hitting the people for unnecessarily. They beat the person with a stick and with so many things, and they cries, and that jinn is coming out from. Certainly, when somebody is beaten, you can ask him anything, he will admit. He will say, yeah, the jinn is coming. You can force him anything, and all the families helping the person, tying his hand and all those things. This person cannot do anything, and now he's saying, oh, jinn is coming. He says, yeah, he's coming out. And then people can see the jinn is coming. There's nothing jinn. This person has some illness, some problem, some health problem, some psychological problem. Now you people are beating him and making everybody to be convinced that there's jinn inside him. And worse than that really is happening with the women. These people do so many things really, the stories that have been mentioned in the books earlier, not only in our time, it really is so disturbing. And I really advise all the women, never go to these liars. They want basically, they are people who have no character. They should not exist on the face of the earth. These so dirty people, what they do. If you look their stories, what Jais has written, a woman, she did zina. So, basically she no more virgin. And in Arab culture and all this Muslim culture, when you marry, first night they see whether the woman is virgin or not. She has lost, the bakara. So she came to one of these Raaqis people. So he said, I can make cure. So he says, you have to pretend that you have got a jinn. So she pretends she has got a jinn. Then the family became very much upset that she has got a jinn and she is about to marry and this and that. So they got the woman. Jahid had written in his book, and it's very early, it is 3rd century of Hijrah. So Jahid said, then they brought the young girl to this Raaqi. They already agreed on this matter. So then they brought the Raaqi, look at the woman, and they said to the family, I got the problem and I talked with the jinn. But jinn said he can come out, but wherever he comes out, he's going to damage it. If he comes out from the mouth, he's going to damage the mouth. If he comes out from the private part, so he will remove the virginity of the woman. So the people said that is the easiest thing, to make him to come out from that part. So basically, then if the people think it is jinn who has damaged all those things. This story has been made. This thing in India, on such a scale really, many women have become pregnant because of these people. They said that, they make, and the family, they trust in these people so much, they leave the woman and this Raaqi alone. And then these Raaqis, they do certain types of perfumes and this and that. They make the women, they become in different condition, and they do all those things. This is happening also in this country, on a big scale. Many Raaqis in this country, they exactly doing this thing. I am saying these stories just to to warn the people. Don't believe in these people. They really are people, deserve curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what they harm the people, and then you give them money, and you believe that they are people to be trusted. What is the right position in this matter? What people should do? That I'll teach you. The truth of the matter really is that certainly people have got many illnesses. Some illnesses is actually in the body. Sometimes illness can be mental. Sometimes illness can be psychological. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made so many illnesses, and for every illness He has made cure. Sometimes people don't make proper effort, they don't find the cure, but if you keep making effort, you can find the cure. Go to right. The way of Allah has made the world is that follow the right procedure that Allah has made. If you follow the right procedure, even if you don't succeed, Allah will forgive you. Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, every illness has got a cure. You have to find. So this thing is clear. The basic, and that's what the Prophet did. When the Prophet used to fall ill, people ask Aisha, Urwa and Zubair said, I asked my Khala, Aisha, that you know fiqh, you know the Quran, you know the Hadith, that we can understand because you are wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know also Arab genealogy, you know Arabic poetry. So we understand because your father Abu Bakr Siddiq was expert of Arabic poetry. He was expert of Arab genealogy. So you know those things. You know how to interpret dream because your father was expert of this thing. But we don't understand how do you know so much about medicine, medical treatment. How do you know so much about that? So she said because when the Prophet used to fall ill, so Arab doctors used to come to him and look at him, and they used to prescribe certain things, and I used to make those medicine for him. That's how I learned. So the Prophet said, that's how he did. That's what right procedure is. You think really, if you people think that you read certain words, it can cure illness. Who knows those words more than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? People say if you read Surah Al-Fatiha, it's cure from every illness. if this is what it means, what you think really, then why doesn't the Prophet read Surah Al-Fatiha? Does he read more than us? Why the Prophet need to go to a doctor? Just think. If you think the meaning of this hadith actually is that any illness you just read Fatiha and you are cured, if this is the meaning, then tell me that didn't the Prophet read the Surah Fatiha? Why does he go to doctor? Why the companions went to doctor? Why in Islam Muslims developed actually medical science so much? Why it happened? If Surah Al-Fatiha can cure the people, that is the meaning, then why people do this thing? If people say that certain, if you have a headache, you read this verse. The Quran never came. If you have a stomach ache, you do this thing. If you have this problem, they have got actually, they have made, dua, medical treatments from the Quran. Actually, they call this thing, alayhi bil Quran, or ad-dawa bil Quran, or at-tadawi bil Quran. They made these things, and they have actually published a book where they treat people by the Quran. But the people who publish the book, when they fall ill, they go to doctor. For you have they made this book. They publish it and they print it and they get money. But when they fall ill, they go to doctors. Because they know this is not, Allah SWT did not send the Quran for this purpose. This is misuse of the Quran, disrespect of the book. The book has come to guide you, to make you proper human being. The book did not come for this small thing which actually anybody can develop, medical science. Book did not come for that purpose, misuse of the book. But people keep doing. And many ulama do, so that's why people are more and more misled. So by doing of the ulama, it does not become valid. Because the Prophet ﷺ has said very clearly, Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa raddun. Anybody who invents in our religion what I did not from the religion, it is rejected. Anybody brings something in the religion which is not from the religion, it is rejected. The Prophet ﷺ, the Quran, Allah SWT never allowed people to do this thing. The Quran never came for this purpose. They said there are hadith that somebody, one of the tribe, a leader of the tribe, he had problem, and then one of the companions, he read Surah Al-Fatiha, he became cured. Yeah, certainly this thing can happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do. He wanted to help those companions because they didn't have any food. He wanted to help them to get food. But this is not that whenever people used to fall, they used to fall ill, they used to read Surah Al-Fatiha. And also, if this is the true, then why you need Raaqi? Can't you read Fatiha? If you really think reading the Fatiha can cure you, tell me really why then you need Raaqi? Who is among Muslims who cannot read Fatiha themselves? Why do you need these people? If Surah Al-Fatiha can cure everybody for every illness, then why you need Raaqi? Why they needed? So this the hadith said, "Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fa raddun." Imam Shatibi said, "فالمبتدع إنما محصول قوله بلسان حاله ومقاله أن الشريعة لم تتم." The person who invents something in religion, he basically wants to say the Sharia was not complete. وأنه بقي منها أشياء يجب أو يستحب استدراكها. There is something left and now we need to complete it. That's what he's saying. So this is a big accusation against the Prophet ﷺ, against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran says, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ افترى على الله كذبا. Who is more wrongdoer than those people who invent lie against Allah the Messenger? If people invent lie. So this lie has gone on a very, very large scale. There's no proof for these people about any of these cures they do. And most of the cures that they do is dirty anyway. But even if they use the Quran, there's no proof for that. What actually is proof for that certainly is, no doubt, there are certain verses of the Quran, their meaning is so clear. If you read them, you understand their meaning, it will help you against the whispering of shaitan. And they make you stronger against many of those problems. That's true. But for that, you don't need anybody else. You need to develop understanding of the Quran yourself. Read yourself. The Prophet ﷺ did not say that somebody else reads for you. Read for yourself. You read yourself. All the ta'awud are for yourself. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ for yourself. Surah Al-Fatiha is for you. You don't need anybody to, with the name of Raaqi to come and to do for you. No. This is what you never found really. I never have found in my life. I asked many ulama. I've been Nadwi ulama. There are thousands of the people all the time coming. I never found in my life any story were genuine. Because it does not exist. Nowhere. I even ask people who do this thing, how much trick they do. One of my teachers mentioned about one of his friends. He used to write ta'weez for the children. If you don't have baby, what he used to write actually in that one is, ladka na ladki. Boy, not, girl. So ladka na ladki. So if you get ladka, boy, Oh, he wrote ladka. He says, yeah, I wrote. And you give me a lot of money. If you get daughter, this is that I wrote ladka na ladki. You get ladki. If you don't have anything, he said that I wrote ladka na ladki. Neither that I wrote. So that what happened. Generally, one of these things happened. That's how he to write. So what happened? Another alim, he married. He did not have any children, for a long time. So now his family, women actually more believe in this thing. So women, first then you have to go now to Raaqis. This man, he can write something. He said, no, I don't believe in this thing. But they kept forcing. So he came to his Shaykh and said that, now women are forcing me to come to this Raaqi. He said, no, don't do it, it's haram. So he listened to Shaykh 1 year, second year. Then the woman said, no, you must listen. So he came to the Shaykh and said, no, you have been asking me to stop, but still I don't have child. Now women are forcing. I must go to this man. The Shaykh said, wait only for 9 months. If within the 9 months your wife does not get a son, you can go to him. Within 9 months he got a son, child born. Then he came to the Shaykh and said, how do you know this? And why you think, how could you allow? Because you don't like this thing anyway. So how do you allow me after 9 months to go? He said, when you insisted upon me that you must go to him, then I realized you are going to have, son. And now Shaitan wants you to go to this Raaqi. He gives ta'weez and you get son and you believe that he has given the son. I realized this thing, that you're going to have son anyway. So you did not go and son happened. If he had gone to the Raaqi, he would have thinking that, you see, I listened to the alim, nothing happened. I went to Raaqi, I got a son. This thing, keep. And in India, there is a place Ajmer Sharif, one of the big shrine. What happens is, when you go there, as soon as you get off the train station, somebody will meet you. He said, why are you going? He said, I'm going to shrine, I don't have a son. So he said, oh, you came to the right place. It actually happened to me as well. I did not have any son, and then I came to this place, I got a son. Then another person will meet, oh, where are you going? I don't have son. I came to Ruqya. He said, oh, you are right place because one of my relatives did not have son. By the way, until you reach to the shrine, 3, 4, 5 people will tell you the similar story. Now you believe. You go there and give a lot of money. Whether you have son or not, nobody knows that. If you get son, you will tell everybody. If you don't get son, you think curse yourself because you think, so many people have true stories. I, the one who did not get it, so I'm unlucky. This is what happening. It really, business in all over the world, liars, the lying, the inventing, in the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no doubt in the day of judgment, their punishment will be so severe. But I don't understand really how people believe in this thing. That I don't, where your mind is, didn't Allah give you mind? Don't you think really people believe in people like that? Who have no iman, no taqwa, no piety, no fear of Allah, and you believe they only are running after your money. They just want to take money from you, and you believe in these things. So this is really very dangerous. Really, when Muslims reach to, people who don't nothing. Mu'tazila, for example, they don't believe in this thing. They don't believe in jinn at all anyway. Mu'tazila. So what happens there? It is story written also by Jahil. One of the house of Mu'tazili, there was old lady. So nobody was there for a moment. People have gone somewhere. So this old lady lived alone in the house. A thief entered into house in the night with black cloth and all those things. He was thinking she's a lady and he will frighten her that he's a jinn and she will run away, then he can steal everything. But he did not know that she's Mu'tazili, she did not believe in the jinn. So he came to the house and he pretended that he is a jinn. And she does not believe in any jinn. She took the stick and she started beating him until she killed him. And the people saw him. He was thinking that, she must be like all those women who believe. Because, dark clothes and all those things frightening the woman. But she knew that there is no jinn. So that, why these jinn don't come to, I tell people, I don't believe in these jinn. So why don't they come to me? That you don't believe me, they should fight me. That you don't believe me, do you make everybody to, disrespect us? I insult them, I humiliate them, I don't respect any jinn. Why they don't come to me? Just think really. I go for the prayer. They don't stop me. And I always stop people from believing in them. Did not ever. Whenever I go for the prayer, no jinn can come and stop me. Just think, not only me, there are millions of people. Many of these people who are atheists, don't believe in anything. No jinn can come to them, nothing happens. Many Muslims, non-Muslims who don't believe in this thing, nothing happens to them. Only happens about those people who have got this weak belief. They think that there's something like that. They are the one who suffer from this thing. And where there are more ignorance, these are more cases. In the villages, people who are not learned, these cases happen more among them. People who have any sense, any knowledge, any wisdom, any thinking, They're never affected by anything like that. So, this really big lie against Allah the Messenger, to think something like that, and to spread this rumor among the people, to get the people's money, and to take the honor of the women. This really, no doubt, it really, the punishment will be very, very severe in the Day of Judgment.
So when we speak about possessions, there's an understanding that people have that are like demons out there. And these demons that people envisage are the shayateen or the jinn. And they come and take over. They somehow, people may vary in their interpretation, but they come into the minds or they take over the body of people. And usually what they do is they make a person go ill. This is the public perception, I'm just saying. I'm not saying this is correct. This is what the myths, the general urban myth out there is that once these demons have possessed people, they usually become ill. They develop some kind of perceptible mental health issues, so they become weird. They might appear obsessive. They've got OCD. This is what people, their relationships usually mess up. This is one of the key things that, okay, the relationship's going downhill. It's usually, or they've developed some kind of illness or a bout of insanity. They act weird, or sometimes what could be called catatonic schizophrenia or something, or they develop weird limb actions and they freeze and they twitch and they got all these kind of gestures going on. And so this is usually, when people see this is what they picture as jinn possessions. And also in the bouts of insanity, they're screaming and shouting and anxiety and all this stuff. Now, first, the key question is why would the jinn be doing this? That's one question comes to mind. We're not saying it's definitely not true, but let's just entertaining this premise for a moment. Why would the jinn be doing this? What is the objective of the jinn in doing this to start off with? Well, the key thing that comes to mind that most people believe, the kind of cultural myths out there, is to create mischief on earth. This is their interpretation, that to create fitna and fasad and to destroy relationships and to harm Bani Adam. This is what people think. So that's the topic at hand. It's not the topic, sorry, this is the problem at hand that we're trying to deconstruct and show. Well, actually, now with that in mind, that picture, let's go back to the true sources, the Quran, the Sunnah, the authentic Sunnah, and the sound voice of reason, and let's take a look at this. Right, jinn possession, demonic possessions, the way people picture this understanding that we've defined does not actually exist. But I want to go into where is this confusion stemming from within the Quran and Sunnah? Where is this coming from? And then I want to take a look at psychological perspectives, and also highlight some, Shaykh Akram had highlighted earlier on about sometimes there are medical issues which we don't know. Like sometimes there's a problem, we don't know why that is. But just by not knowing, does it mean it's the jinn? That's a 100% valid point. And I will highlight as well some psychological cases that I want to share with you guys, but that will be in my second part. I want to take a look at that to just show the complexity of some cases, and if you go back a few decades, how that could be so easily inexplicable. And you have to remember that the backdrop to all of this is coming from a single point, and that is human beings trying to explain what's going on around them. You see, we have to remember that historically, the most learned people in any society were the scholars, were the religious scholars of any religion. So in Christianity, the monks were the people who could read and write. In Hinduism, the Brahmins. In Islam, the ulama. But in Islam, there is this thing that all Muslims should read the Qur'an, so there was literacy to that level. But most people, if you think about it historically, were just farmers, most of society was always just farmers. Just worked, lived on a farm their entire life. Then you had small versions of cities, not like today's. And people, generally speaking, they had trade and they did their things, but lives were relatively simple. People who learnt stuff, who studied mathematics, who studied trigonometry, who studied philosophy, history of the world, poetry, who studied belief, who studied other religions, this was just the ulama who dedicated a huge portion of their lives to learning and then usually went on to teach or become judges and things like this. Your normal, in the past, you wouldn't go to buy something from a shop and the guy happens to be, for hobby, he happens to be a researcher on mathematics, or he happens to be somebody who's deeply read on history, or this didn't happen ever. It was not like, I don't mean as a totally somebody who was an expert and then did a job but this was not the norm at all. So let's say you had ulama in the past speaking about atoms. Can an atom actually linguistically means something that can't be divided any further. So you had people like Abu Bakr al-Baqalani debating with other ulama of the Asha'ira and other mutakallimin. Can there be al-juz'u alladhi la yatajazza? Can there be an atom, or is that further reducible? Think about it. Why were ulama? And they're arguing this. They're going on time after time after time. You think today ulama wouldn't do that, but why would they do it? You have detailed discussions on where is the aql? Where is the aql? In the past, many ulama, is it in the dimagh, in the brain? Many ulama said no, the aql ain't in the dimagh. Why are they bringing these questions to the ulama? Who else should they take them to? So people say, you have aql, you have cognition. Where is it? So people said, so the ulama are using their resources to come up with answers. These are not necessarily religious questions, these are just worldly human questions. So the ulama are saying, but Allah says, جَعَلْنَا لَهُمْ أَفْئِدَةً. We gave you hearts. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Don't you think? The fu'ad, the heart, is where aql is. Imam Abu Hanifa, so you get quotes from many of the Salaf saying the heart is where the aql is. Imam Abu Hanifa actually said the dimagh is where the aql was. But many people disagreed with him back then. They believed that the dimagh, like Greek philosophy, just had these humors in it, these kind of fluids and gases which kind of just influence your temperament. Why is this important to understand? That people were coming with normal whatever problems, asking these people to explain them. And they were trying to come up with some answer to help these people. Right, so that is because we need to keep that in mind when we're dealing with this. So why are the ulama, where is this confusion coming from within Islam? Certain verses had historically been debated. Verses in the Qur'an, Allah speaks about a very popular verse that when Allah speaks about those people who take a riba, لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. Those who take a riba do not kind of go about their daily affairs, except how لا يقومون, or they do not stand, or however you want to see this, or لا يقومون, as though they do not go about their daily affairs, except as though somebody who has been يتخبط in Arabic means to become unstable. Like you've been all over the place. As though somebody has become unstable due to mas, like this touch by a devil or a demon. What does this mean? So some people said, well, okay, so what people coming to this, people who are supporting this whole jinn possession, they say, here's a verse in the Quran highlighting this. First of all, people who were taking riba were not doing that. They were people who looked normal. People who were taking riba weren't actually acting mental. They were just people looking out for their interests. They were just saying, no, I'll give you 100 if you can bring me back 200 at the end of the month. They weren't kind of like all over the place and acting like lunatics. So many mufassirin had highlighted this is talking about in the akhirah. That لا يقومون إلى الآخرة or min quburihim, or when they rise from the graves, they will be all over the place. And some people said, no, this is, so it's not even talking, it's got nothing to do with this, jinn possession. Some people said, oh, well, this is speaking here about them in their lust and greed. That this is how, it's as though they're possessed. They're so greedy, they don't want to help people. This greed has so overtaken them, it's as though they've lost their mental faculty. But why this massum min ash-shaytan? Why this touch of the shaitan? Why does it have a reality? Why would Allah use this as an example if it wasn't real? This is the question. So here, many people had highlighted, including the mufassir like Ibn Atiyah and other people, that this is imagery. That Allah draws upon the imagination of mankind when He's addressing them. Let's take another example. Let's take a look at the verse in the Quran where Allah is speaking about Jahannam. And He says that in there's this tree, Shajaratum min Zaqum, this devastating tree. And then Allah says that طلعها كأنها رؤوس الشياطين, that it emerges as though it's the heads of devils. Have you seen a devil? Has anybody seen a devil? So how do they know what that's supposed to mean? When you say that, oh, this tree looks like it's the heads of devils, but I haven't seen a devil. That's because it's okay. You have imagined. Allah knows He is a'lam bi khalqihi. He knows they have creation, that they have imagination. And what's interesting here as a side note is that in life, the most intimidating and frightening phenomenon that you will ever encounter right throughout life, contrary to what you may think, is actually your own imagination. Your own imagination is far more scarier than anything actually out there. What you actually imagine scares the hell out of you. So Allah is drawing upon the imagination of people. So this verse is one of the key verses that is misused or misinterpreted by people who draw into this or draw upon this whole jinn demonic possession kind of narrative. A few hadith I want to highlight as well, and I'm sure the Shaykh will be highlighting as well several perspectives, but just popularly these are brought to the discourse straight away because I want to take a look at the religious kind of aspect first, and the kind of rational, and then come back to the psychological and stuff like that in the second section. So there's a few hadith, 3 hadith. First of all, I just want to highlight there isn't a single sahih, sarih hadith in this bab. Not a single hadith that is free of criticism. There are a few hadith, there are many hadith which are just completely weak or weak. There are certain which rise above that weakness thing, and I'll just highlight the 2 or 3 that are usually used in this context. But there is nothing which is sarih and sahih, unquestionably. So as in it's free from criticism. Taking into consideration, like just take this point into consideration, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, alayhi wasallam has come as a paragon of mercy for mankind. Not just for the Sahaba or for the people around him, forever. And he never transmits this, he doesn't teach people about this. And think about it, this is going to impact us all every day. And he forgets to tell us, or he chooses not to tell us. Clearly, think about it. So the hadith that are usually used is a hadith to do with, there's a transmitter, Ya'la ibn Murrah, that he accompanies the Prophet. He's a person from Bani Thaqif who accompanies the Prophet on a journey, and he says that I saw 3 things which nobody else saw, And one of them was that when the Prophet was walking past this lady on a journey, she had a baby, it was crying, and the Prophet said, okay, and he exorcises this, and he brings out this demon. This is one narration that is used. Not sahih. I mean, some have tried to argue it to be sahih, but not unquestionably sahih. So as in, it's not free from, the rawi is usually, the popular ruwat of it is Manhal ibn Amr, it's been criticized. You've got people like Abdurrahman, but whoever is in the chain has had criticism. Okay. Second hadith, and the fact that this hadith actually says, I saw three things, one of them this which nobody else saw. And the jinn affects everybody, and the Prophet decided to just show one person and never tell the other people, in itself is absurd. That the Prophet wouldn't teach us how to protect ourselves. Second understanding, second hadith is one of Uthman ibn Abil As, once again from Bani Thaqif, that is Thaqafi, who comes to the Prophet in a delegation in 9th Hijri, and he complains. Now this hadith is transmitted in different books, one in Sahih Muslim, and then other books, Ibn Majah, Tabrani, and the narration kind of varies a bit. The Sahih narration, which is sound, is that he comes to the Prophet and he says that I'm struggling with the Qur'an. This is what he says. And he says, I'm struggling with this in Sahih Muslim. And he doesn't mention exactly what the struggle is, but he says that I struggle with the Qur'an. And the Prophet says to him that, he tells him, and in the hadith he kind of, فَضَرَبَ صَدْرَهُ بِيَدِهِ, like he kind of like taps his chest with his hand, and he tells him that أُمَّ قَوْمَكَ, go and lead your people, فَإِنَّ مِنْهُمُ الضَّعِيفُ وَالْقَوِيُّ, and they've got different mixed abilities in them. You've got strong people, weak people, so on. And he says after that, Wallahi, the Qur'an was always with me, like I never. Now in other narrations, that narration is sahih. Other narrations, like, which are criticized and weak, and some people have tried to say they're okay, but they're not sound, as in they're not unquestionable. They've been questioned and weakened by some people. That he says, oh, I've got a shaitan, and the Prophet says, he kind of aspirates, like just that kind of tafal, what we call in Arabic, and it's like slightly with salivated aspiration, like to go like this towards him, and he opens his mouth and he says, "Ukhruj adu Allah, come out the enemy of Allah," and something comes out. This is not established. Okay, Imam Nawawi, when commenting on this in Sahih Muslim, says all of these riwayat are talking about one qissa. And he says that, and there is no evidence in these that is to do with jinn possession. He says that this is most likely, he says when he was struggling with the Qur'an, it was either hifth, or Imam Nawawi says maybe it was kibr, that he felt arrogant that he was leading his people. And so this is what Imam Nawawi highlights on this, and he says that this is the sound narration in which none of this is mentioned. There's another hadith which people bring quite a bit, which is to do with a woman, Aban, once again, very criticized, that she speaks about her grandfather, saying her grandfather came with a child, saying that the child is ill, and the Prophet says, you know, same kind of thing, "Ukhruj ya adu Allah, come out, O enemy of Allah," and they saw something coming out. Heavily criticized. Some people just say da'if, some people said it's very weak, and some people try to strengthen these incidents, but once again, nothing sarih, sahih. For such a ubiquitous event, for something that would affect everybody, the Prophet doesn't really transmit anything in sound transmission. So it's important to take this understanding. We will be hearing a lot more about ulama that have taken certain positions, that have what they've said, and on both sides. And I want to go into some psychological cases as well to explain things like that. But the most important thing here is I want to highlight something, and that is that it's actually, I mean, it's been said earlier on today, you heard it earlier on today, but also people like Imam Ghazali have highlighted, and many other people, that bil-aqli yu'rafu sidquddin, that we only know whether something is accurate through reason. When the Qur'an came to people, you see, this is people's logic today. People's logic today is, why is this true? Because it says so here. Well, how do you know that's true? Because it says, like, so for example, how do you know the Qur'an is true? Well, it says so in the Quran. That's an illogical statement. That's not how the Quran came to us to invite us to the Quran. Allah said, Allah didn't say, believe in me. Why? Because I said so in the Quran. And who revealed the Quran? I did. And therefore believe in me because I said, believe in me in the Quran. Allah said, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Do they not look at the إِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ. Don't they look at the sky? Don't they look here? Does it make any sense this world has come like this? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you not ponder over the Quran? أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Is there any ikhtilaf in it? Allah is calling you to the voice of reason. He's saying, believe me. He's condemning this thing of saying, oh, هَذَا مَا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. When you say to them, listen to reason, they say, oh, no, this is what our forefathers used to do. So how could you? So the Quran itself comes with this understanding that look, you have to resort to reason. Now with reason, you can accept. You do accept. I accept the Quran. I accept this. It makes sense to me. But when we come across these issues, we have to bounce them back on this voice of reason through accessing the Quran. So it's important that this is something that I want us all to keep in mind, because this is very key to this topic of demonic possessions and stuff like this. That where are we getting all these ideas from? To sum this segment, I just want to say that where are we getting all these ideas from? Because if you came in a vacuum, you had no cultural history, you were just an alien, you just came, approached the Quran and read this, you wouldn't have this understanding that these things happen. And the second point, that look, people had to explain phenomenon that occurred to them in their environment. And they used the best understanding they could. And they saw people acting weird. They couldn't explain it. Maybe it is the jinn. Maybe it is. So they accepted it. But what about as time progresses and we get a greater understanding of what's going on? People misuse several evidences, and I'd highlighted before that our understanding comes to us either through what is textual, rational, experiential, or cultural sources. This is where we derive our knowledge from. Now, what's interesting is there is a hadith that is used a lot by people, and this in itself, if we just sometimes just pause with hadith or evidences when they're being used by people and just look at the bigger picture, it has the answer in it. So we just heard a hadith, Shaykh Akram had just read a hadith which is used by many such people, that inna shaytana yajri min ibn Adam majra dam. That shaitan, he flows through the blood of the son of Adam, through people. This is how he. Now this hadith, it has a context. The actual hadith contains the context that the Prophet is walking with his wife, and there's a group of people standing there, and as they walk past, they carry on, and the Prophet stops and he comes back and he says, Innaha Safiya, that's my wife Safiya, by the way, with me. And they say, Subhanallah, Ya Rasulullah, that you don't need to say anything, as though you don't need to justify to us, you're Rasulullah. And this is in the context of the hadith. This is a Sahih hadith. This is in the hadith. They say, Subhanallah, Ya Rasulullah, you are who you are. And he says, Inna shaytana yajri min ibn Adam majra dam. That shaitan, that the insinuations of the shaitan are with each and all. These people weren't possessed. These people weren't like acting all like unstable, and they were all over the place, and they weren't behaving any weird symptom, displaying any weird symptoms. They were just, the fact, suspicion. That's what the Prophet was speaking about. That look, I'm not saying you were being suspicious, but it is human to sometimes have insinuations, have negative thoughts about people. That's human. So just keeping that in mind. And I want us to take a look at the experiential and then the psychological. Right, just speaking, before we get into that, you just heard some examples about people being so easily conned into a culture. This is a massive, this is a multi-million pound industry. That said, I'm not saying that everybody in it is necessarily devious and plotting. People actually buy into the idea as well. So I'm not saying many of these Raaqis may be very sincere in what they do. They've just bought into the idea, that's all. Experiences is an interesting one. Why is it that we only take our experiences? You heard just a few minutes ago that these jinn problems only seem to affect those people who believe in them. You don't see atheists, you don't see mega atheists, you don't see non-Muslims getting afflicted. Now, and why only our experiences? If we're going to say, yeah, because a lot of people, when you tell them these things don't exist, I'll tell you, the first thing they'll say, they won't say, yeah, but some may say now that, oh, because of this hadith or that, because they've learnt that. But most people will say, no, my uncle, his nephew or his niece, I witnessed, or I know somebody who this happened to, or my auntie, or my mother. People will use anecdotal experiences to say, oh, but so-and-so, they experienced this. The question is, why only our experiences? Why not everybody's experiences? Why not other faiths? Why do we discount immediately things like reincarnations? I've quoted before on several occasions, why do we discount miracles of the Hindu sadhus? And why immediately, even though they could have millions of followers? And I've quoted an example of who was very famous in his time, Satya Sai Baba, saying that he had demonstrated in front of apparently millions of people miracles. And he had millions attesting to his miracles. Yet you wouldn't for a second entertain it. Like if I told you that, even for a second, you won't entertain it. You won't even think for a few seconds, you know what, maybe he is doing all of this. You'll just dismiss it immediately. And the interesting thing is you'll start to reason against it. You'll start to use reason. Even though when I present, let's say I present cases of demonic possessions, you'll never resort to reason. But to discount and discredit other religions, immediately the voice of reason is called up. Like when you say, oh, but this is dumb like people say, oh, but it's absurd in Christianity to say 3 equals 1. They don't say, well, you say, well, why is it absurd? Oh, because Allah says in the Qur'an. No, they say, because look, logic, it doesn't make sense. They say it's absurd to say, oh, the Hindu mythology. This is absurd. Why? Not because Allah says, because it's absurd. They say it doesn't make any sense. When you present the same thing from what has been Islamicized, they shut down. No, it doesn't matter, I've experienced. Now, what's interesting, there has been a psychological study on certain people when they're going through religious experiences and they're listening to their preachers and they're listening to like they're attending church or they're attending things, and people have checked and they've measured kind of brain neural activity, and they thought what they were going, and you can find these kind of the results of this online. They thought they were going to find a lot of certain neurotransmitters being released and positive feelings and all this, like, you know, the preachers going on, but what they actually found was the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in a lot of our thinking and rational thing. Actually, activity in it shuts down when we're going through our own religious stuff, when we're engaging in our own religious kind of ceremonies. Neural activity in the prefrontal cortex seems to shut down, which is interesting. So people block themselves from reasoning when it comes to their own faith. That's just, I thought, well, and you see, when I said here that we don't see jinn possessions happening with kuffar or with atheists or something, people might say, oh, but how do you not know that the mental illnesses are not jinn possessions? You see, this is like, I want to give you an allegory, a kind of a story paradigm of a child who doesn't understand the world and asks its mother asks the mother that, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why is that happening? And the mother doesn't have the answers. So the mother says, well, what it is the mother comes up with a cyborg invasion paradigm, where the mother says what it is these cyborgs, these kind of like human-like artificial intelligence, is responsible for everything. That's the mother's answer. So the mother says that this is what's making, so why is this happening? Oh, because artificial intelligence and these cyborgs have done this and they've done this, and oh, they've convinced this person to do this. So this becomes the conspiracy. Now the child, because it trusts the mother, takes on this paradigm. The child can use this to answer anything that it can't understand in the world. So when you say, oh, but why is an earthquake? Oh, but this was a conspiracy, which really the cyborgs, and oh, but why is Donald Trump doing this? Really, Donald Trump has been convinced by the cyborgs who've done this. Oh, electronic stuff is like, if you've just got one version to answer everything, then yes, you can do that, but it doesn't make it true. Like Muslims have got this like their version of this cyborg paradigm is jinn. Anything, oh, it's just the jinn then. Oh, but he doesn't accept it because he's already been influenced by the jinn. Oh, but, this person had a mental illness. Oh, that was the jinn. Oh, this happened, this is magic. Oh, well, that was the jinn. Oh, so it's just this, you have one the plasticity, because it stretches, you can just fit this on anything. This is in philosophy of religion, you study this example by somebody known as Basil Mitchell, known as the parable of the partisan and the stranger. And he says that this is what faith people do. The partisan is this person who's part of a movement, a revolution, and there's a struggle going on. But he meets this stranger one day who he doesn't know. The stranger somehow wins his trust and tells him that he is actually the leader of this revolution that he's a part of. Because this is obviously picturing back in the days when you never had social media and stuff. So he convinces him, I am actually the leader of this. So imagine it's me and I now bump into you and you're you believe in this. And I tell you, I am the actual leader of this. And stay strong. I want you to stay strong on this, hang in there. But then I tell you that, by the way, you will see me on their side and acting to the contrary to what the cause stands for. But this is all part of the greater plan. So no matter what you see me say in public, do not fall for it. I am with you and it's for the cause. Now you see, once you buy into that, it doesn't matter what I say or do in the real world, you will rationalize it. I could now stand there and tell you, oh, by the way, this whole thing was a lie. Oh, the cause was just something I made up to make money. But you'll be like, he's acting, it's good. He's really in character. And I'll be like, no, it really is nonsense. It's nonsense. You see, now it doesn't matter what I say, you've bought in to this parable, that's it, you're locked in. So Basil Mitchell gives this example about this is how religion works with a lot of people. So it's interesting, and they call that, by the way, non-propositional faith, where you don't care whether evidence or reason or anything contradicts what you believe. You just don't care. Because in your mind, oh, it's all part of the bigger picture. Oh, it's meant to trick me. Oh, science. Oh, this is the shaitan tricking me. This is part of the test. Like, I'm not supposed to buy into it. Because if I bought into it, that's part of the test. So, you see, then it becomes like, there's no way to win now. It's game over, like for anybody who tries. So it's important to keep these things in mind. Why is this so important to tackle this topic? It's important because, one, the mockery that is being made out of Islam, Allah and His Messenger, in the name of these myths. And two, the tyranny of abuse that is being conducted with this belief. It is it is unbelievable. I mean, you've heard some stories from Shaykh Akram, Nadwi Sahib right now, but there's countless stories. Abuse, beatings, violence, sexual violence, just power structures, destroying lives, destroying families, exploitation, money, embezzlement, countless. Like people, they will extract, there's so much going on. People will take money, they will take £1,000 per, more. People have houses given to them. I had somebody tell me about a case where the person said, okay, in order to cure the sire on this house, you have to really just give it away in the name of Allah. And really maybe you should just give it to me and I'll bless it. And they did, they gifted it to the Shaykh. The Shaykh then, when I hear these stories, I realize I'm in the wrong business. That's the business you need to be in. So it's the abuse that's being, this abuse, because it's being Islamicized, it's being given an Islamic veneer, what's going to take the brunt of it in the end is Islam. So people will just say, you know what, Islam is just a load of nonsense. And you might not say, I might not say, but the coming generations, our children, when they grow up, they'll probably say, you know what, this is just mythology. Islam has just become mythology. Like Zeus and Apollo and the Greek gods or the Hindu gods. It's just stories, and because it's nonsensical. So I wanted to highlight that, and I wanted to show when we can't explain things. Okay, when we can't explain. Now, just to as a few seconds to touch up, we have to understand that, look, in science has gone through many, like when we look at the domain of life, it is so diverse, and this is something I want to come back to when we speak. When I touch up on relationships being impacted with this. But when we can't understand things, look, in psychiatry and psychology, you've got something called neurosis and psychosis. Yeah, neurosis is like it's like weird things, weird beliefs that we can all have, or we display weird things, and we can all do this. This is natural to a great extent. I would probably say we are all weird in our own way. There's nothing wrong about that, okay, to a certain extent. But some people can't differentiate that weirdness with normalness. So you might be weird when you're at home, but when you're in front of people, you can behave normally. Some people can't do that. That falls into psychosis. They can't snap out of it, okay. And we have many today. I'm not saying we have all the answers, but we have some answers that give us, shed light about things that can explain, whoa, how would people have explained this in the past? I've touched up on something in the past, saying things like palinopsia, a visual kind of, when you have a problem with after images. Now check this out. Everybody, if you look at something in bright light and you look away, you can maybe for a fraction of a second see an after image. In some conditions, that actually persists for much longer, abnormally, and much stronger. It's not like a shadow after image, it's like a clear after image. Like I look at the phone there, I look there, I can see the phone there. That actually is called palinopsia, and it can, in certain condition, affects people. Now, can you imagine in a village a few hundred years, and this happens with people. I see you here now, I look there, I see you there. How would I explain that in the past? What, an abnormality in the brain? No. Maybe you're a demon. I see you in many places. This is very... there's a condition I've once again I've highlighted before, and it's worth highlighting, called the Charles or the Charles-Bonnet syndrome, where there's a part in the brain called the fusiform gyrus, and this part it gets affected for whatever reason. There's some abnormality in it. Now, people with this start to see, this is the part of the brain that processes imagery about things like teeth, geometric sizes, buildings. So when there's an abnormality, and it usually affects people sometimes who are losing their sight or hearing, and the brain starts to compensate by overactivity in the fusiform gyrus. So they will see things like people with strange buildings. They will see people with stretched faces and weird teeth. So there's a famous case where the neurologist Oliver Sacks speaks about speaking to this lady who sees these men walking in Eastern dress clothing with long teeth. And he asks her that, and she says, am I going mental? And he says that these people, what do they do when you see them? Are they trying to harm you? And she says, no, they're not trying to harm me at all. See, this is the difference between psychosis, where people believe that, oh no, I'm getting attacked, like in schizophrenia or different kind of disorders. She says, I see them, but I know they're not real, but I can see them. And it's weird because it's like a movie, but it's... And he explains to her, this is part of the Charles Bonnet syndrome. And when they check that part of the brain where a normal person, if you see teeth, do you know, if you see teeth, there's a part of the brain that actually activates for teeth. There's a neural, within the fusiform gyrus, the neural activity. Now, that part is getting activated. Now, they can suppress this with drugs. You can give drugs and that will just suppress activity. How would you explain this in the past? If somebody came to you and said, oh, I see teeth and I see people, I see buildings, you would have no kind of explanations. And let alone, we also heard some examples of where people sometimes do get better. You know, people say, oh, but so-and-so did this ruqya and they got better. I want to highlight to people the placebo effect. Okay, there's two actually. It's actually interesting because there's a study I'll bring your attention to as well. It's by Ted Kapchuk, who is an associate professor at Harvard University, a medical professor. I want to bring your attention to some of his studies. But before that, I just want to highlight there's a placebo effect where you think something is happening and it's actually happening. It creates and there's the opposite called the nocebo effect, which causes harm, where you actually can cause harm. And this actually happens and has been tested and through trials. It's not just something that people have made up. But what was interesting about this study, just to highlight the placebo effect, is Ted Kapchuk, what he had done was with about 270 subjects, they wanted to test them who were suffering from certain pains to do with the wrists, or they had like the carpal syndrome, or their elbows or the shoulders were hurting. He got half of them and he administered them a pill, which was actually just nothing. It was just made out of cornstarch or whatever, and just useless pill, but told them that, okay, this may have these kind of side effects, and this is what it was. And the other half were administered acupuncture. And they were told that, why don't you take some acupuncture and stuff like this? Have you got stress? You know, it's hurting here, it's hurting here. And, you know, with the needles, acupuncture, you're all aware of it. So what happened is, to their amazement, almost a third of the people started to complain, and some very severely, of the side effects that they warned, including, from just sluggish behavior to not being able to get out of bed to excruciating pain, to being like, oh, feeling dizzy, I can't do this, the exact symptoms which they warned of, a third. The half that he had given acupuncture, more of them, a great quantity of them, actually said that they felt a lot better and they felt relief. Now, so from this study, you could say, well, that's brilliant. Acupuncture works better than medicine. Well, actually it doesn't, because both were a sham. Not only were the pills he was giving fake, but the needles that he was using were actually retractable and didn't even go in the skin. They were actually just giving the illusion that they were using needles. They weren't actually, they were sham needles. The interesting thing this showed was that the pain that people were feeling, insomnia, can't go to sleep, nausea, throwing up, was real. It was actually happening. This wasn't like, oh, they weren't throwing up. The person was actually really throwing up. They were really feeling pain. It's called psychosomatic behavior, where you actually can get ill. It's called the nocebo effect. And the placebo effect, where you can actually get better. So when people are going through jinn exorcisms or ruqya or things like this, things can actually work. It's not that but they could work anyway. It's like you heard Shaykh say that, but some people would get better anyway. It's not, and it's a bit like that scam. If I go through it with so many people, by the end of it, I'm going to have a hardcore cult that definitely always get better. Like imagine you did that same experiment but with exorcism or with ruqya, same thing. Somebody could ask, well, what is the purpose of ruqya? See, ruqya, in my understanding, first of all, the Qur'an, when it came to say that the Qur'an is a shifa, we need to read the full verse. Don't just stop where it says wa shifa. It says shifa'un lima fis sudur. It is a shifa for what is in the hearts. What is it talking about? Like what? Like cardiological heart diseases. It's not talking about heart diseases. It's talking about disbelief, kufr, superstitions, myths, these very things which Islam came to eradicate. Now you might say, well, yeah, but so why these ruqya then? Why these? First of all, we do believe that, look, Allah knows His creation, and how He helps His creation is not sometimes truly understood by us. But at the same time, these things work as a scaffolding to help people until their iman becomes stable. Because when you come from, it is very easy for humans to fall into superstitious behavior. It's very easy. We too easily, in fact, part of the study that I spoke about of Ted Kapchuk, they realized that, with the acupuncture, that rituals, one of the findings was that rituals and drugs use the very same biochemical pathways in the brain. That was groundbreaking to realize that when people are undergoing rituals, it's highlighting the same neural activity that drugs would use, the same pathways. So there is this, that human beings are very easily misguided into superstition. So ruqya and these things have been set as a scaffolding with Allah's name to guide people to a pure iman. So it is a scaffolding, it's like a Zimmer frame to help you walk until you can walk. It's that kind of to help you along the way. Because you see, when people said, oh, but I'm like to the Prophet, oh, what about superstition? And he taught them the dua. Allahumma la tayra illa tayruk wa la khayra illa khayruk wa la ilaha ghayruk. He could have just said, relax, there is no tatayyur, there is no, auspicious, you don't need to worry about it. Why teach them a dua, that too one which has almost a ritualistic rhythm to it? Because the mind clings to rituals. And people need that to become strong in their iman. So with this, I want to just give you some examples of some conditions, psychological disorders. Now check these out and just think in the past trying to examine these. Now there's a condition known as, you've got prosopagnosia. Yeah. Now this is a condition known as face blindness. It can happen to people who are stroke victims, or they could happen due to mental health sometimes. And they say maybe 2.5% of people in the world are born with it. It is an inability to distinguish between faces. So there's a section in what we said, the fusiform gyrus, which is known as the FFA, the facial fusiform area, which humans use to distinguish between faces. Why does your face not look like his face, not look like... Like if you think about it, like if you look at a crow, right? A crow, all their faces all look the same to us. But to the crows, I'm sure they can distinguish. So how do humans distinguish between human faces? Like we use this area in the brain. Now there is a disorder known as prosopagnosia where you can't tell the difference. Like if I hear your voice, I would say, oh my God, that's you. But when I look at you, I just can't recognize your face. Like I can see your face, but I can't recognize it. Now that is, and when that happens, it happens later on in, like let's say with a stroke or something, and you can imagine the whole trauma. And how would people in the past say, say, well, maybe magic has been done onto you, or maybe you've had the, something has possessed you. There's something known as mirror touch synesthesia. Now, this is where you can actually feel what somebody else that you're looking at may be feeling. So if right now, let's say somebody hugged somebody else, and if you suffered from mirror touch synesthesia, you would actually feel being hugged. You would actually sometimes feel pain. Like if I saw somebody getting hurt, I would feel that pain. Under this, you can Google phantom limbs. Sometimes people have lost their limbs, and yet they can still, like they've been amputated in an accident or something, and they can still, so they've lost their arm, but they can still feel the pain in their arm. There's huge studies on this and how that works in the brain. How would you answer that in the past? There's actually, there's one speaking of alien hand syndrome, where you feel your hand or your part of your body is possessed by an alien and acts involuntarily. Somebody could just say, well, that's easy because the jinn's controlling it. Well, but I mean, see, this is that your view fits all. Here's an interesting one. This is known as the Capgras delusion, right? Where people feel that a loved one, somebody close to them, is actually replaced by an imposter. And you think this is, and this happens to people often, sometimes with paranoid schizophrenia, or if they've had brain injury. You actually feel that it's the same, like it looks just like the same person, but you actually believe 100% that that is an imposter. He knows the same things, but it's an imposter. And you can actually search the cases that have happened in real life, the Capgras delusion. Now, here, and this is here's another interesting one. Hemispatial neglect happens sometimes after a stroke or other kind of brain injuries or lesions. Hemispatial neglect is where half of the world, half of perception becomes blind to you. You just can't, it just doesn't get processed. So you don't see half, like it's not that you don't see, like you can see, but you will not see what's on that half. So you will just see this half. So these people will sometimes only eat half a plate. If you give them a plate, they'll only eat from that half. Or if you showed them a clock and said, can you copy the clock? They will copy it from with the numbers 12 to 6 only. And they don't see the others. How would you explain that if you lived in the past? And here's an interesting one as well. Aphantasia. Now this was an interesting one, and it happened, there was a famous case of a 65-year-old man who went for, he'd gone for some angioplasty surgery, and after it, this was a side effect, that he lost the ability to visualize anything. You just can't picture up anything in your mind anymore. Like right now, if I wanted to think of an elephant, if I wanted to think of a phone or a car, in your mind, you can think of it. He could no longer think of any, you can't visualize any images. Now, you can imagine how that so easily people would just say, well, maybe somebody's done magic on you, or a demon has possessed you. I mean, just think in the past trying to answer these difficulties. Things like, there's actually one known as an exploding head syndrome, which causes no harm, no pain, but you can just occasionally hear a really loud bang inside your head. But it doesn't harm you, there's no pain, but you just hear like a bang. You think, and you can, but I definitely heard it, but it's not real. And one that you can actually, this one you can actually see on YouTube. You can go and search several cases, an interesting one. The foreign accent syndrome. It's just really fascinating. It's a speech disorder. Sometimes develops spontaneously. Or sometimes after an incident, something's happened where they just wake up or they're regaining something. It could be an accident or whatever. And they develop a foreign accent. So you've got the case on YouTube with the lady speaking in a Chinese accent and somebody in a French accent. They've never been to France. Somebody in a southern accent, they're from northern England. I mean, and they're just all of a sudden speaking in a southern accent. Inexplicable. They can't explain. Even today, neurologists don't know why it happens, but it happens due to, see, not knowing something doesn't mean, see, this is what atheists use so often to attack people of religion. Oh, what they call the God of the gaps. Or the moment you don't know anything, oh, it must be God. And in this phenomenon, this is like the jinn of the gaps. Like the moment we don't know anything, it's the jinn. Oh, we can't explain it, must be the jinn. It's like the jinn of the gaps. So it's not just because we don't know the answer, it doesn't mean we can't know the answer. The hadith that you heard earlier on, that the Prophet said, مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ مِن دَاءٍ إِلَّا أَنزَلَ لَهُ شِفَاءً. In a riwayah, the Prophet said, عَلِمَهُ مَنْ عَلِمَ وَجَهِلَهُ مَنْ جَهِلَ. Those who know the shifa will know it, and those who don't know it won't know it. Meaning, go out and find it. Like you can't. So it's interesting to see all of these kind of things. Put yourself in the past where you are faced with this. Like if you had a person just all of a sudden with multiple personality disorders, what they call today dissociative identity disorders, right? Now, how do you explain that? Like people, all of a sudden I'm somebody else. And the thing is that a lot of these cases happen usually more often in our communities amongst women. And these people have a background of trauma, abuse, of just like tragedies. In many cases, they've got so much going on. So in our communities, you'll have things like, obviously segregation, but not just segregation, control, excessive control. So let's say a girl in a typical, I know in the UK it's a change, it's slowly changing, but it's still there. Like girls are not allowed to do anything, guys can do anything. Guy can get away with, guys can go out, do everything. Girls can't. So always restricted at home. Now on top of that, always suspected, like the suspicious, oh, are you chatting to anybody? Are you doing this? Are you doing, a lot more control on a girl. Then on top of that, arranged marriages, sometimes forced marriages, or sometimes maybe not forced, but emotional, like our Asian version of forced, like the blackmail, kind of emotional blackmail that, oh, I'm never going to speak to you. And then on top of that, they make them marry, a lot of the time, their own cousins. Now think about it, if you grew up with somebody, you already, you're probably not attracted to the person sexually. And then on top of that, you got to marry them, you've been controlled all your life. Sometimes within our families, hopefully now within the UK it's reduced or doesn't happen as much, but they beat the hell out of you as kids, right? So a lot more maybe when we were growing up. But so you've got all this kind of stuff going on. You get like torture, torment, this, oh, you got to believe this, you got to do this, How does the psyche cope? One way is it breaks down into these kind of disorders. It starts reacting weirdly. Like think about it, if you physically do something to your body, it reacts. Why would the brain not react? We think everybody and we have such a stigma towards mental health. Muslims get so offended if you say this could be a mental health issue. So what do you mean? Like my mom ain't mental. I think well, I'm not a betting man, but if I was. The thing is, look, what do you mean? Like, well, does this sound normal, what you're saying? That, there's all this going on and airy, fairy tales and all this kind of stuff. No, but she's not. No, it's the jinn. God damn it. It's the jinn. That makes sense. Or it's magic. Or my relationship has broken down. Because of the jinn. Somebody sent jinn to interfere with us. Now, I've said, okay, even if, right, we were to consider what the jinn are, and this is when I was saying earlier on, they would be a different domain. So they speak about life breaking off into these domains. You have archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. And from eukarya comes all animal, plants, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, archaea actually is they probably feel the most ancient form of life on Earth, which is tiny, microscopic, it's single cell, doesn't have nuclei to it. And it is actually what they call an extremophile. I'm just giving an example. It survives in extreme It could survive in up to 150 degrees. Thrives. Like forget boiling water wouldn't kill it. Freezing temperatures generally wouldn't kill it. It survived in space. It doesn't require oxygen. It doesn't require photosynthesis the way other things do. It doesn't. This is archaea. It thrives in hot lava and stuff like that. Somebody could say, well, Allah says, وَالْجَانْ خَلَقْنَاهُمْ مِنْ قَبْلُ مِنْ نَارِ السَّمُومِ. We created them from fire. But if you were to draw parallels of life with anything, I'm not saying they are archaea, but you would draw them with things like this, these things which are extremophiles, completely different to eukarya, where we get our life kind from plants and animals and humans and so on. Yet, so would you say, oh, a bacteria is jealous of my relationship? Oh, that, my relationship messed up because this jinn fell in love with me, or fell in love with my wife, or fell in love with, and it just ruined everything. That's like, oh, this virus was just flying around and it fell in love with me and ruined my whole love life. It's like, what the hell is that? Doesn't make any. So why do you think jinn work like that? Like, oh, they work like humans. They're not the same species or genus. They're not even the same domain as us. Like, so it's important to understand these things. We can't just belittle. We have to take responsibility. If a relationship messes up, it's because of your own doing, because the relationship messed up. Human beings, look, they mess up at times. It's not. Sorry, I'd like to take that word back. Even messing up isn't the right word. People at times fall in and out of relationships. It's human behavior. There's nothing, you can't measure your success by your relationships, as an example, because we have a vision that a relationship ought to be like this. We feel we've failed and we need somebody to blame it on. Sometimes there was a case study, I don't want to go into it, and I've highlighted it before, where there was a very religious person, a Raaqi, an exorcist, who many years back I had the opportunity to interview and visit, and whilst we were speaking, his jinn came into character, came into form, and we had this whole dialogue and discussion, and I spoke to the jinn, and it went on for over an hour. And he told me his name, and he told me who he was from. His name was, I've highlighted the story in detail before. His name was Hukma. He came up with a name. My name is Hukma. And he's from India, he's from Kashmir, and he's 500 years old. All nice numbers and a scenario. But the interesting thing was when I asked him, oh, well, you're a long way from home, soldier. What are you doing over here? And so, well, what it was is that usual scenario, well, this guy, the exorcist, I love him, and then I realized, oh, he didn't mean I love him. I said, I'm sure you do love him. He said, no, I really love him, and he stuck his tongue out, and I was like, oh, okay. I misread that one. I thought you meant that you just love him. Oh, that love. Obviously, at that point, I extremely feared for my own safety, thinking, right, I don't know how I'm going to relate this story back to people. Right, so I thought, but what was interesting is he then goes on to explain that, oh, actually, he's homosexual. The jinn, this is the jinn talking, sorry. The jinn is speaking to me. Obviously, the person is speaking, and whilst he was speaking, he would do all this, speak like that. Obviously, once again, very ominous, very kind of trying to be scary. And so I was like, I'm homosexual. And so I was like, okay. Well, so the thing is, you see now, look, here is a person who is very religious. He has in fact, that guy had an extraordinarily long beard, incredibly long. It was abnormally long. It was like this long, wallahi, it was so long. It was scary long at that point. Now, I don't know, I haven't seen the person in years. But anyway, at that point, he had a very, very long beard. Very scruffy looking person, religious, that kind of attire, the thobe, and has a name amongst people. He's an exorcist. Now, you can imagine, he must be thinking to himself, look, I'm having homosexual tendencies. I'm a man of God, for God's sake. I'm one of the good guys. How could I be having this? How could I be thinking deviously about men? So, displacement of guilt. It's easy. Look, psychoanalysts explain it all the time. You just project your demons onto something else and chastise them. Say, oh, it's not me. It's a jinn. The jinn is gay. This jinn, may Allah curse it, has possessed me, and that's why I'm thinking like, it all makes sense. Obviously, I could never think like this. It's the jinn that's thinking like this. So it's okay when I think like this, because really that's just the jinn in me doing that. And when I'm in control, then it's me. You see, this is how this person made sense of his world. I'm not saying the person is lying. I'm not saying he's trying to lie to me. He's not like saying, hey, listen, this person's coming, I'm going to trick him now. Maybe he genuinely believes what the story he's come up with. But that doesn't make it true. Like if you genuinely believe there's a spaghetti monster out there, it doesn't make it true. So these are the things that I wanted to highlight, that look, in the past there were many things that people could not explain. We could not sum up, but to say it's the jinn of the gaps is nonsensical, it's absurd. And it makes religion into a joke, and beyond that, it doesn't tackle the greater issues of abuse. So this isn't, sometimes people say, but why can't we just sit on the fence? Okay, this isn't a view. You're saying, because there were many ulama, you heard from Shaykh Akram, many ulama being quoted. There was Fakhruddin al-Razi, Qadi Abu Ya'la from the Hanbalis. There was people, there were other ulama from the Mu'tazila, but even within Ahl Sunnah, you'd heard up until recent times, Shaykh Shaltut, Mustafa al-Maraghi, the great Mashaykh of Al-Azhar, Ibn Ashur, famous Mufassir, even Shawkani in his tafsir. These kind of things, they don't accept this kind of stuff, jinn possession. But people say, okay, this is an opinion, but Ibn Taymiyyah said this. And, so-and-so said this. But so why don't we just have it as two opinions? No. Because it's not just, this isn't like, should I do Raf al-Yadayn or should I not do Raf al-Yadayn? Because look, Raf al-Yadayn or not Raf al-Yadayn is no big deal. If you decide to do Raf al-Yadayn or I decide to do it and you decide not to do it, it's a fadila within Salah, there's two opinions. This opinion results in mass exploitation, in incredible, the tyranny of abuse is unleashed by this. Huge, a whole multi-million-dollar industry is on the back of this belief. Religion is ridiculed on the back of that. You believe in demons possessing you. I mean, in the 21st century, let's like people will go to a doctor, it's okay, he's just got a jinn. And then Islam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is ridiculed as a consequence. And all of these things make this unacceptable to just say, well, look, it's just two opinions. Let's just be diplomatic towards it. So this is why I refuse to have a diplomatic stance on this, that this abuse is unacceptable, it needs to be brought to an end, and we need to popularize this understanding in saying, and this is why, hopefully people, obviously yourselves here, but people who watch this later on can learn from this, inshallah. So, hayyakum Allah. So I hope that's of some help.